Level 1. Canyon River Rapids at Hershey Park. May 1987 marked a momentous occasion for Hershey Park in Pennsylvania. Nearly a decade had passed since the debut of their iconic Super Duper Looper, and now they were ready to unveil their latest attraction, the Canyon River Rapids. Excitement rippled through the community as crowds gathered to experience this cutting-edge water ride. But that excitement proved tragically short-lived. Just 2 weeks after its grand opening, on May 23rd, the promise of aquatic adventure transformed into a scene of terror. One of the 6-person rafts suddenly capsized, hurling all its occupants into the churning, aggressive waters below. The Canyon River Rapids had been engineered to deliver an unpredictable whitewater experience, propelling circular rafts through 1,700 feet of twisting channels and cascading waterfalls. Park officials had marketed it as harmless fun, with the only warning being, "You will get soaked on this ride." Nobody imagined the real danger lurking beneath those playful words. Approximately halfway through the course, disaster struck. The raft violently tipped and overturned, ejecting 6 passengers, 2 adults and 4 children, into the rapid current. They were immediately swept downstream, fighting desperately to keep their heads above water while ride operators and emergency personnel scrambled to respond. All 6 victims sustained injuries ranging from minor abrasions and contusions to severe lacerations and near-drowning trauma. Mercifully, everyone survived, though several required immediate medical intervention. The subsequent investigation revealed a perfect storm of design failures. Investigators identified 3 contributing factors: excessive water flow speed, unbalanced passenger weight distribution, and a critical design flaw in the canyon's architecture itself. The raft had apparently collided with an unusually wide section of the waterway, becoming trapped sideways in the current, the exact orientation that caused it to flip. Hershey Park immediately suspended operations for comprehensive safety inspections and modifications. Engineers narrowed the problematic wide section and recalibrated the water flow systems. Additionally, staff members were permanently stationed at strategic points along the route to monitor raft behavior and respond to potential issues. Runaway Mine Train at Alton Towers. For families queuing for the Runaway Mine Train, it promised to be just another enjoyable attraction. However, on July 20th, 2006, what should have been a routine family coaster experience devolved into a nightmare scenario. 20 people sustained injuries when a mechanical malfunction caused the train to break apart, triggering a devastating collision. The Runaway Mine Train had been Alton Towers' family-friendly roller coaster since 1992, making it the park's longest operating coaster. The ride had been marketed with playful danger, an adrenaline booster featuring a wild train that's out of control and getting faster every second. On that fateful day, the marketing became horrifyingly literal. Carrying 46 passengers, the train began its ascent up the lift hill when one of the coupling mechanisms suddenly snapped. The front section immediately separated from the remaining cars and began rolling backwards down the track, gathering momentum with each passing second. Inside the dark tunnel, it slammed violently into the rear portion of the train with catastrophic force. 6 passengers required immediate hospitalization. 2 victims suffered injuries so severe they needed emergency airlift to North Staffordshire Hospital's trauma unit, diagnosed with spinal damage and internal injuries. More than 20 others sustained bruises, lacerations, and shock. Fortunately, none of the injuries proved fatal, though many passengers faced long recoveries. Park management characterized the incident as isolated, insisting there had been no history of problems on the Runaway Mine Train of the sort that's happened today. It's a very popular ride, we're not the only park with one, and we've had no history of problems with it. But their reassurances rang hollow. The ride was immediately closed for extensive investigation, leaving visitors questioning the safety of every attraction in the park. If an accident could occur on a family-friendly coaster designed for children, what did that suggest about the more extreme thrill rides? Their concerns proved prescient. Less than a decade later, another Alton Towers attraction would dominate international headlines, and that incident would be far, far worse.
Level 2. Feedback at Worlds of Wonder India. Every amusement park posts the same warnings. Don't ride with heart problems, back or neck pain, or nervous conditions. Pregnant women must abstain. And the golden rule that supersedes all others. Always wear your belts and harnesses preferably fastened. But at Worlds of Wonder Park on June 25, 2017, the very safety device designed to protect riders nearly caused a catastrophe on an attraction called The Feedback. The feedback represents high-intensity thrill engineering at its most extreme. Built around a massive rotating central structure with multiple large swinging arms, the ride delivers a disorienting, exhilarating experience unlike anything else. As the entire mechanism spins like a carnival carousel, the arms swing in wide pendulum arcs, launching riders high into the air. At the terminus of each arm sit rider pods that spin independently, creating a triple-axis rotation that simultaneously sends passengers in circles, swaying side to side and rotating in their seats. This type of ride depends entirely on the integrity of shoulder harnesses to keep riders secured. But on that summer day, one harness catastrophically failed. As the ride initiated its very first rotation, a male passenger's restraints suddenly snapped open. With nothing securing him in place, he was immediately ejected from his seat. Witnesses watched in absolute horror as he struck his head against an iron step below before tumbling helplessly into the bushes beneath the attraction. Incredibly, almost miraculously, he survived with only minor injuries. But his ordeal had ended. For everyone else still aboard, the nightmare was just beginning. The ride did not stop. The situation deteriorated rapidly as a second harness failed and another rider began slipping from her seat. She was saved only through the quick thinking of a passenger beside her who managed to grab and hold onto her trembling form. For 45 agonizing seconds, people hung suspended in their compromised restraints, praying the remaining harnesses would hold until the ride finally decelerated to a halt. Witnesses reported that the ejected man's wife had been screaming desperately, pleading with staff to stop the ride immediately. The operators ignored her completely. When the ordeal finally ended, enraged guests confronted the operator, who fled the scene to avoid their fury. Later, park management dismissed the entire incident as merely a technical fault, emphasizing that no one had been severely injured.
Joker's Jukebox at Six Flags New Orleans. When we envision amusement park tragedies, our minds typically conjure images of towering roller coasters or terrifying drop towers. We assume danger correlates with heightened speed. But at Six Flags New Orleans, the park's deadliest attraction wasn't a sky-high thrill ride. It was a modest spinning attraction called Joker's Jukebox, operating just a few feet above ground level. On August 13, 2003, 52-year-old Rosa Donaldson was treating her 4-year-old grandson to a summer afternoon of amusement park fun. As evening approached, they made their way toward the Joker's Jukebox, a seemingly harmless ride featuring 30 cars spinning on 6 rotating arms. Nothing appeared particularly dangerous. That perception shattered in an instant. Rosa, standing near her grandson to ensure his safety, suddenly faced an unimaginable horror. One of the spinning cars whipped around and struck her in the head with tremendous force. Before she could react, another car slammed into her body. Witnesses screamed in terror as Rosa collapsed, bleeding profusely. Paramedics rushed her to Lakeland Medical Center, but the trauma was overwhelming. Her pelvis had been completely crushed. Despite the medical team's desperate efforts, she succumbed to her injuries. Subsequent investigations revealed the tragic circumstances. Rosa had entered a restricted area to properly secure her grandson's harness, motivated purely by love and concern for his safety. Unknowingly, the operator had initiated the ride cycle, giving her no opportunity to escape the spinning car's path. While her death triggered investigations by multiple agencies, the park's story was far from concluded. 2 years later, Hurricane Katrina devastated New Orleans with unprecedented fury. The park suffered catastrophic flooding, rendering it beyond repair. Six Flags New Orleans permanently closed its gates. Today it stands abandoned and decaying, a silent monument not merely to a lost entertainment venue, but to a grandmother's final act of devotion.
Tsunami at M&D's theme park in Scotland. On June 26, 2016, families enjoyed a beautiful summer day at M&D's theme park in Motherwell, Scotland. Dominating the skyline was the Tsunami, Scotland's only inverted roller coaster, promising a dizzying thrill as riders swung through high-speed turns with their legs dangling freely below them. That afternoon, something went catastrophically wrong. As the coaster navigated a routine bend, 5 cars suddenly detached from the track, colliding with a support structure before plummeting nearly 20 feet to the ground. The mangled wreckage crashed upside down, landing directly on top of a toddler ride operating below. Chaos erupted instantaneously. Terrified children wailed, victims screamed for assistance, and frantic parents searched desperately for their children. One witness who had exited the very same ride mere minutes earlier watched the disaster unfold, later describing the scene as something out of a horror film. Amid the panic, first responders and courageous bystanders worked frantically side by side, struggling to free victims still trapped in their twisted, mangled seats. 10 people sustained injuries, including 8 children. All victims were transported to hospitals for emergency treatment. 4 children were admitted to the Royal Hospital for Children, 1 in stable condition, 3 others listed as serious. Among the most severely injured was a 12-year-old girl suffering critical head trauma. Disturbingly, this wasn't the tsunami's first malfunction. In 2011, 9 people had become stranded 60 feet in the air on the same attraction after the lift chain snapped. They remained suspended for 8 agonizing hours before rescue. Just months before the 2016 crash, another ride at the park had malfunctioned mid-air, requiring firefighter intervention. The investigation revealed shocking negligence. The coaster had been repaired using incorrect welding materials, a completely preventable error. In 2019, the park owners admitted to health and safety violations and received a £65,000 fine. But for those who experienced that day, no financial penalty could undo the trauma. The ride was permanently demolished, leaving only empty space where the tsunami once stood. According to Ben Swan, Queensland's secretary of the Australian Workers' Union, union leaders had been raising concerns about inadequate maintenance and aging infrastructure for considerable time. Their warnings had been systematically dismissed. The tsunami crash represented a catastrophe, but disturbingly, we've only scratched the surface of how horrific theme park accidents can become.
Level 3. Trailblazer at Six Flags St. Louis. For decades, roller coaster thrills have been anchored by a simple, reliable concept: sitting down. You took your seat, secured your restraints, and held on tight, a formula that had functioned flawlessly for generations. But during the 1980s, amusement parks began experimenting with a radically different adrenaline delivery system, posing an unprecedented question: what if passengers didn't sit at all? What if they stood? In 1984, Six Flags over Mid-America, later renamed Six Flags St. Louis, decided to embrace this experimental concept. They converted the River King Mine Train into one of America's first stand-up roller coasters, christening it the Trailblazer. The attraction utilized largely the same track layout, but the trains were replaced with new upright cars equipped with supposedly cutting-edge restraints designed to secure riders in standing positions as they navigated high-speed curves. Marketing materials touted it as revolutionary state-of-the-art engineering. In reality, the ride barely survived 3 weeks of operation. On July 9, 1984, Stella Yoakum and her husband Carl were visiting from Indianapolis. They boarded the Trailblazer in the very back row, with their teenage daughter and her boyfriend seated directly in front of them. Halfway through the ride, immediately after the second lift hill where the train twisted into a tight spiral, Stella vanished. According to Carl's testimony, they had been holding hands when the car jerked violently. Stella was suddenly ripped from her position, nearly pulling him out with her. Witnesses observed her ejected from the ride, striking a tree before falling to the ground below. She died later that day. When the train returned to the station, all of Stella's restraints remained locked in place. Park officials claimed she must have fainted, that her body went limp and slipped through the restraints. But Carl vehemently rejected this explanation. His wife had no medical history suggesting such an event, and the autopsy findings supported his position. Rumors spread rapidly. Some individuals even directed suspicion toward Carl himself, though absolutely no evidence supported such accusations. The far more likely truth: the Trailblazer's restraints were fundamentally, fatally flawed. They could appear properly locked while actually failing to secure passengers during aggressive turns. The Trailblazer was shut down almost immediately. The stand-up cars were scrapped, and the track was converted back to its original sit-down configuration. The entire experimental program concluded in less than 1 month.
Jetstar at Beach Bend Park. The safety of every amusement park depends critically on maintenance crews. Before gates open to the public, these teams inspect tracks, test safety restraints, and examine every component. Their singular responsibility: ensuring rides are completely safe before a single ticket is scanned. But on August 30th, 1975, that routine inspection turned tragic for one young employee. His name was Mark Gaines, a 17-year-old from Hermitage, Tennessee. Like countless other teenagers, he had secured summer employment at the park. That morning, Mark's assignment was helping prepare the Jetstar coaster for daily operations. For riders, the Jetstar delivered compact, intense thrills, a labyrinth of sharp turns and sudden drops that built its popularity on speed and intensity. But for Mark, standing on the track during maintenance procedures, that same speed proved fatal. As Mark bent down to remove the block securing the cars overnight, one of the coaster cars unexpectedly swung through the track. In a split second, it struck him with devastating force. There wasn't even time to react. The impact caused catastrophic head and neck injuries. Coworkers rushed to his aid, but intervention was impossible. Mark was transported to the hospital where doctors could only pronounce him dead on arrival. The cause? Massive head trauma and a broken neck.
Although a state investigation officially cleared Beach Bend Park of responsibility, the park decided to permanently close the Jetstar. The decision represented a direct response to overwhelming public fear and a complete erosion of trust that no official verdict could restore.
Rolling Thunder at Six Flags Great Adventure. Six Flags Great Adventure's signature attractions in Jackson, New Jersey. This towering dual-tracked wooden coaster stood 96 feet tall, with trains racing side by side at nearly 50 miles per hour. Constructed with more than 60 miles of Douglas fir lumber, it represented a classic of its era. The ride was so thunderously loud it literally shook the ground. Visitors described it as thrilling, terrifying, and utterly unforgettable. But just 3 years after opening, tragedy struck. On August 16, 1981, before the park admitted guests, 20-year-old Scott Tyler, who had worked at the park for several summers, boarded for what should have been a routine test run. He knew the ride intimately. Everyone did by that point. But halfway through the circuit, something catastrophic occurred. Tyler was ejected from the train, falling to the ground and sustaining fatal injuries. Emergency responders arrived immediately, but nothing could be done. The autopsy later confirmed that Tyler had suffered severe head and body trauma, causing immediate death. Investigators quickly ruled out mechanical failure. State inspectors confirmed that Rolling Thunder was structurally sound, properly constructed, safe, with safety bars functioning exactly as designed. The problem wasn't the equipment, it was how the equipment was or wasn't utilized. What investigators discovered was more chilling than any mechanical defect. Tyler likely hadn't secured his lap bar. Worse, he may have been riding in what they termed an unauthorized position. Essentially, he had climbed out from under the safety bar, gripping the train with only his hands as it accelerated through curves. But at approximately 35 miles per hour, with the coaster's intense G-forces, no human grip could maintain hold. Just 2 days after this fatal accident, Rolling Thunder reopened. Officials declared the ride safe, attributing the tragedy entirely to human error. Rolling Thunder continued operating until 2013.
Ladybug Coaster at Adventureland Park, New York.
It appeared to be the safest attraction in the entire park. Bright red cars decorated with little black dots, traveling barely faster than walking speed, featuring only a few gentle dips along the track. Designed specifically for young children, the type of ride parents never questioned. But in August 2005, this gentle children's ride claimed a life. Stephen Gray, 18 years old, had spent 2 summers working at Adventureland. He knew the attractions intimately, especially the Ladybug. That night, approaching closing time, he was conducting one final ride cycle. Everything appeared routine, until suddenly it wasn't. The Ladybug coaster was creeping back toward the loading platform at barely 5 miles per hour when Stephen somehow lost his footing and fell face down onto the track. Before anyone could react, the front car struck him, causing severe injuries. Co-workers and guests rushed to assist, desperately attempting to lift the car manually, but it weighed several hundred pounds and refused to budge. For 10 agonizing minutes, they struggled to free him. Once finally extricated, paramedics rushed Stephen to NASA University Medical Center with massive internal injuries. The trauma, however, proved too severe. He succumbed in the early morning hours. Later investigations found no mechanical issues whatsoever. The ride functioned exactly as designed. Investigators believed Stephen had stepped into an area of the track where he shouldn't have been. The most disturbing aspect? Stephen had complete control over the ride's operation, yet somehow ended up in a position no operator should ever occupy. But the park's week of horror hadn't concluded. In a truly unbelievable turn of events, another tragedy occurred just 1 day later. This time, a woman was ejected from an entirely different attraction, the Top Scan ride. She also did not survive.
Level 4. Wave pool tsunami at Yulong Shuyu Water Amusement Park. Wave pools are engineered to simulate ocean conditions in controlled, safe, predictable environments. But in 2019, one water park in northeast China lost control of its wave-generating machinery. Instead of generating a gentle ripple, it unleashed a towering wall of water that slammed into hundreds of swimmers, leaving 44 people injured. At the Yulong Shuyu Water Park in Longjing, visitors had packed into what was advertised as the largest tsunami pool in Jilin Province. Families bobbed peacefully in inflatable rings, anticipating the wave machine's next gentle surge. What arrived was no ripple. It wasn't even a large splash. It was a devastating wave that overwhelmed swimmers like a miniature tsunami. Captured video footage showed the wave launching people through the air like rag dolls. Swimmers were violently thrown against each other and slammed into the pool's concrete perimeter. Pure chaos erupted. In total, 44 people sustained injuries. 5 required hospitalization with broken ribs and other serious trauma. Some victims were crushed beneath the wave's force, while others were caught in the panicked crowd attempting escape. Officials later attributed the incident to a machine malfunction, specifically an electrical fault in the wave machine's control system. Initially, online rumors claimed an intoxicated ride operator had deliberately increased settings for amusement. The park vehemently denied this allegation, and local government officials supported their position, classifying it as a malfunction and shutting the pool down for repairs. But the footage speaks for itself. What was marketed as family-friendly entertainment transformed into something resembling a disaster film in mere seconds.
Rocky Hollow Log Ride at Dreamworld. On April 17, 2016, 19-year-old Samson Sharon and his friends boarded the Rocky Hollow Log Ride at Dreamworld. Log rides have always been considered among the safest attractions at any theme park. Their classic formula of winding canals, playful splashes, and a final exciting drop made them beloved family traditions. For Samson, however, what should have been an enjoyable experience would end in a desperate fight for survival. Partway through the course, Samson fell from the boat into the water. He panicked, struggling to reach the surface. But the horror didn't end there. Other log boats were bearing down on his position. He had no time to escape. Within seconds, 2 boats ran over him consecutively. They struck his head, chest, and ribs, knocking him unconscious. His friend witnessed the incident, but couldn't intervene immediately. He had to complete the ride, disembark, and sprint around the course to pull Samson out himself. According to Samson's legal representation, no staff members assisted, no emergency stop was activated, nothing. By the time they reached Samson, it appeared it might be too late. He had suffered a fractured hip, broken ribs and ankle, head trauma, neck injuries, and had nearly drowned. He was covered in lacerations, his clothing was torn, and he was barely breathing. Subsequently, he developed pneumonia from the water he had inhaled. Fortunately, Samson survived, but the aftermath proved brutal. He experienced chronic pain, ongoing back and groin injuries, and profound psychological trauma. Years later, he remained in counseling and continued fighting Dreamworld in
Level 5. Ferris wheel at Greenville County Fair. The Greenville County Fair represented a cherished summer community tradition, a week-long celebration of classic entertainment, fairground cuisine, and thrilling attractions. But on the evening of August 8, 2016, instead of creating fun memories, 3 young girls found themselves in a life-threatening catastrophe. Kayla and Briley Reynolds, ages 10 and 6 respectively, along with another 16-year-old girl, were riding together in the fair's iconic Ferris wheel when it suddenly malfunctioned. In an instant, all 3 girls fell from their donla, one by one, plunging more than 40 feet to the ground below. The fair's cheerful atmosphere transformed to screams in the horrific sound of screeching metal as the Ferris wheel lurched to a halt. High above, the basket the girls had fallen from dangled precariously. On the ground, absolute chaos erupted as parents sprinted toward the ride while emergency crews rushed to respond. All 3 girls were transported to Johnson City Medical Center that night. 2 required helicopter airlift, while the 3rd traveled by ambulance. Medical updates were difficult to hear. 10-year-old Kayla suffered an arm injury, though nothing life-threatening. The 16-year-old, initially listed in critical condition, was eventually upgraded to stable. However, the youngest, Briley Reynolds, was in the worst condition. She had sustained severe brain injury and required intubation at the scene before transport was even possible. In the press release, investigators attributed the accident to mechanical failure, explaining that the basket carrying the girls had snagged on another gondola, causing it to flip over. But the investigation uncovered a far more shocking reality. The Ferris wheel basket had no seat belts or arm restraints to protect riders. According to inspectors, these basic safety features were not required for the ride's design. They were considered voluntary, and operating a Ferris wheel without them violated no laws. When questioned about other ride status, the inspector dismissed concerns, stating they had found only minor issues such as fiberglass cracks, most of which were quickly repaired. After the accident, the Greenville County Fair shut down all mechanical rides. While the fair returned the following year, it did so without its iconic Ferris wheel. Treetop Twister at Lightwater Valley was promoted as a fresh, modern thrill ride featuring spinning cars, sharp corners, and heart-pounding near misses with surrounding trees. But just 3 weeks after its June 2001 launch, the near miss wasn't near at all. It actually happened. On June 21st, 20-year-old Gemma Savage, a student from South Yorkshire, visited the park with friends for what should have been an enjoyable day out.
She boarded the twister expecting nothing more than a quick, dizzying ride. But partway through the course, her car collided head-on with another vehicle. Witnesses later described the impact as brutal. According to one friend, Gemma slumped over, her shirt stained with blood, her body limp. She had suffered devastating head and neck injuries and died the following day in hospital. 3 other individuals were also injured in the collision. Initially, no one could comprehend how this had occurred. It was a brand new high-tech ride. How could 2 cars possibly collide? But as investigators examined the attraction, a shocking truth emerged. A wiring flaw in the ride's control system allowed operators to override built-in safety mechanisms. In other words, the ride could continue operating even when it absolutely should not have. Lightwater Valley Attractions Limited and an electrician admitted breaching health and safety laws. The park and manufacturer were fined a combined £155,000. The electrician personally received a £2,500 fine. But for Gemma's family, no monetary amount could compensate for their loss. And the twister's grim story didn't end there. In 2015, a young employee was nearly killed when a coworker started the ride as a joke while she remained in the track area. Then in 2019, a 7-year-old boy fell nearly 30 feet from the same attraction.
Extreme at Blue Bayou and Dixie Landing. On July 11, 2010, 21-year-old Lindsay Zeno boarded the Extreme roller coaster with friends, anticipating the dizzying, spinning thrill the ride famously delivered. On that day, the promised adrenaline rush transformed into terror. As the coaster spun and twisted through its course, Lindsay was thrown from the train. When it returned to the platform and the spinning stopped, Lindsay's horrified friends discovered her seat was empty. According to witnesses, midway through the ride, Lindsay's chest restraint came loose. She attempted to pull it back into position, but before she could secure it, the train whipped into a turn and threw her 30 feet to the ground. The crowd erupted in screams as they realized what was happening. Some onlookers stood frozen in horror, forced to witness her fall. Emergency crews rushed to the scene, but their intervention proved insufficient. Lindsay's injuries were too severe. She was pronounced dead shortly after. What followed was profound confusion. The investigation, led by State Fire Marshal Butch Browning, discovered no mechanical failures. The track was intact. All drives and electrical systems functioned properly. In fact, the coaster had passed a complete inspection just 1 month prior with 0 violations. Ultimately, no one could definitively explain what went wrong. Officially, Lindsay's death was ruled undetermined. Although witnesses reported seeing her restraint come loose, inspectors maintained that the restraint system should have held. The ride was shut down during the investigation. But this wasn't the park's first safety issue. Just 4 years earlier, a 2-year-old boy had fallen 25 feet from the Over the Rainbow ride, breaking both arms and legs. There were already lawsuits regarding the Cajun Cliffhanger ride, alleging the park failed to utilize proper safety restraints. For Lindsay's family and friends, the silence following her death was brutal. No closure, no clear explanation. Just one haunting question: how does a healthy young woman riding a modern coaster end up dead with no mechanical failure to blame? That might be the hardest aspect of this entire tragedy.